Well, last week at SeniorBowl.com, we began our countdown to the NFL Draft in May with our 7 cornerstone positions. Now we're 6 weeks away from the NFL Draft, and now the 6 guidelines to having a successful draft that you've kind of gathered over your 20 years in the NFL.
Yes, 6 insurance policies that all have to work together to ensure a quality draft. And number 1 is having a sound philosophy and approach to scouting. In other words, it's got to start in training camp in terms of evaluating your own team all the way through the regular season, all the way through the college evaluation portion during the regular season, through the all-star season, the combine, the pro days. But you've got to have everybody on the same page, and that's why when these teams make changes at the end of the regular season with the head coach or GM, it is really difficult to get everybody speaking the same language and talking the same way about prospects in a 3 or 4 month period prior to the draft. So sound approach to scouting, sound philosophy in terms of what it is that you're trying to identify in the players. Number 2 is the cooperative spirit between the scouting portion of the building and the coaching staff. And this is an area where sometimes it depends on if the head coach is in charge of the organization or if it's a GM-centric organization. And the bottom line is you need the coaches to be involved in the process, and you want them to like the players the scouts like, so that when they get there, they'll be willing to work with them. And if there's ever an issue that develops, it always ends up hurting the player, which ultimately hurts the organization. So you have to get coaches and scouts on the same page working together. Say the running back coach works with the scout who particularly majors in evaluating running backs. You want them on the same page working together, not only through the draft, but after the draft when they're trying to sign college free agents. So again, you want everyone on the same page. Number 3, continuity of staff. And this is huge, because if you live in the scouting world for multiple years with the same group of scouts, everyone starts speaking the same language, and you begin to understand, okay, this scout is really good with offensive linemen, but he's not so great with defensive backs. This other scout is excellent with defensive backs, but not so great with offensive linemen. And as the GM, you have to be able to assess that in terms of putting your board together. And that only comes through time and being in these meeting rooms and discussing players. Number 4, utilize everybody's capabilities, from the general manager all the way down to the interns. I can remember in my days with the Ravens and the Browns, we had our interns shuttle the players as they visited our campus back and forth from the airport. Well, they were all ears in the van, and they would actually come back and say, hey, such and such was really a good guy, he treated everybody well. Or so-and-so was really a jerk. We don't want him in our locker room. And that plays a part in terms of the overall picture of a player. And that's all the way down to somebody that's wearing your organizational emblem on their chest. They can offer a nugget of info that can help you, again, play the odds to increase your chances of getting the right person on your team. Number 5, utilize all the information. That's from the area scout grade in September to the intern's van grade to a 40-yard dash time to a vertical jump to some nugget that you get maybe from a trainer or a graduate assistant at a campus. Try to utilize everything, because if you weren't trying to gather all this information, everything means something. So you don't want your scouts and your coaches wasting their time on the road. You want them trying to accumulate as much information as possible, and you have to take it into account, or they're not going to do it next year when you didn't take it into account this year. And then the last thing, Rob, is trying to make every effort to take the best player available. Now, what happens on draft day, you'll see teams sometimes move up to get the player that they absolutely want. Other times they'll move back because they're not in love with any of the 3 or 4 players that are still available. But the idea is for them to get into a position to take the best available player for them, regardless of position. And you hear teams talk about drafting for need. I think you can do that sometimes in the later portion of the draft. But still, again, if a player has talent, he will find his way onto the field. You will figure out how to utilize him, and oftentimes teams will take a player just based off need at a spot that they think he can plug in and play, and he's not that good, and ultimately they would have been better served to take another player at a different position, even though they have somebody there. What happens if that player gets hurt the first day of training camp? I've seen it happen numerous times over the last 20 years. So take the best player available. Most of the time, need has been already factored in to the way a team sets their board. So ultimately in the first round, every team, when they draft, they're going to say, we took the best player available, and it just so happened that it fulfills this hole that we have on our roster.
So those are 6 ways to ensure a successful draft. Next week, as we go our countdown down to 5 weeks before the draft, we kind of flip the table a little bit, right?
5 pitfalls of how to not to ensure having a successful draft. And I've lived on both sides of the coin, so I can give you the
Everybody
good,
has, yeah.
the bad, and the ugly.
There you go. That's next week at seniorbowl.com.